Welcome to another episode of Positive Solutions for Life. This is Peggy Meyer. Today's guest is Christine Devane. Christine is the founder and CEO of Brightfin, a very simple money app which was nominated for the best mobile app in August, October, and November of 2024 and won the Platinum Award for the best mobile app in September of 2024. Christine started Brightfin after a 20-year corporate career in product management and marketing because she saw that young people needed better tools to keep track of their expenses and help them save for what they want in the future. Welcome to the podcast, Christine.
Thanks, Peggy. It's great to be here.
Oh, I am excited for our conversation. I've got four older kids, kind of adulting age, and
Yeah.
plus with a lot of like kids these days, it's like, do they really know about financing? And I've got one in college that has taking a personal finance class, right, or financial planning class or something like that this semester, and has to keep
Good.
track of her budget of what she spends and takes in, and it's an eye opener, I think. But can you
For sure.
start the conversation first by just sharing just a little bit more about you, your personal journey, and how it has led to where you are today?
Yes, thank you. So I am new to the finance world. I'm a bit of an outsider in the finance world. I was an English major in college, so I'm always kind of like, what am I doing here? And if you try to predict when you're younger where your life is going to go, it's really not going to turn out the way you planned it necessarily, or maybe didn't plan it. But you got to be surprised by the happy coincidences that come your way. So anyway, I have ended up in personal finance as an English major, and I think it's no surprise that our app is based on alliteration in four words: spend, splurge, save, share. So
Right.
that's the product that we
Right.
have now. Yeah, but my career journey after that English major started in writing and then into marketing and finally product management. So that's where I got into, interested in solving people's problems and figuring out how to help them with, tools that you can develop, whether that's, sometimes they're physical products, which are always cool.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's, apps like we have now.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. That's so interesting because I have a little, nice, like I think everybody really kind of likes to help other people, and it's really
Hmm.
interesting how life does do this twists and turns, and it comes out in different ways, and we can no way can we predict what we're going to be doing, in the future, and in these young people too. But it takes money, and it takes that. So how did you get the idea to start Brightfin, and like how did it really come about? I mean, English to personal finance seems like sometimes of a leap, but not really when you explain it that way.
Yeah, it's a meandering journey for sure, or it has been, and I expect it will continue to be. And
Mhm.
I'm embracing that, and I hope young people do that too. I mean, lean into it. You can't overplan everything.
Right.
So Brightfin really came out of graduate school. I was in a master's program in product design and development, and we were looking at big problems to be solved. And at the
Hmm.
time, it was the 10th anniversary of the financial crisis, and we thought, well, that was a big problem.
Hmm.
What can we do about that? And there are a lot of, structural things that we as individual people can't change.
Yep.
But there are other things like, I mean, the housing crisis, that people took on a lot of loans that they couldn't afford, and a lot of them really know why they were doing that or what
Yeah.
they were doing there. And so we thought about, why didn't they know that? You need to intervene earlier. I mean,
Hmm.
I'm thrilled to hear that your daughter has a personal finance course
Yeah.
in college, because I think we absolutely need more education in this area. But we were looking at financial literacy as a general problem,
Hmm.
concept, and we interviewed some undergraduates. Now, this is at Northwestern University in
Hmm.
Evanston, Illinois, which is up on, beautiful campus on the shore of Lake Michigan.
Hmm.
Uh, Really nice, very well regarded school. You'd think, okay, these kids got it made, right? They're going to be totally fine. And what we found when we asked people real questions, we had on a whiteboard, what's your biggest fear about money? And I can still see two of these responses in my mind to this day. These two post-it notes. Some people said, oh, my biggest fear is I spend too much on takeout. Yep, sure. Every college kid worries about that. That makes sense. But we had two of them where we said, what's your biggest fear? And one person said, being trapped in poverty. And the other one said, struggling my whole life.
Hmm.
And that really hit me right there, that this isn't just like a theoretical,
Yeah.
economic model of how Americans are doing. I mean, this is tough. And you
Hmm.
think that somebody graduating from college has got the world ahead of them. And this is what they're sitting there worried about. I mean, we need to do better. We really need to do better.
Yeah.
So from, then I thought, okay, this is serious and I need to think about taking this forward. I mean, I had another full-time job at the time. I had a couple of different full-time jobs
Yep.
before I got to the point now where I'm working on Brightfin full-time.
Uh-huh.
But that's kind of where the seed was planted.
Nice, nice. I mean, I hear a couple different things. I heard that, that poverty and that struggle. And for me, as a former mental health therapist, I am like, those are like mental health issues, like that worry,
Yes.
that anxiety, that, of the unknown. And sometimes we don't even know like how to get out of it, like the logistical things, because finances is health. I'm like, that
Yes.
is a big part of health. I mean, if, along with physical health, like if you don't have your physical health and you don't have your financial health, like life is going to be a struggle.
Mm-hmm.
So, can you
Mm-hmm.
touch a little bit on that? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm so glad to hear you say that because I think this is kind of underappreciated. I mean, when you ask people what they worry about, the majority of Americans in every age group worry about money. For young people, it's something like 82%, which is higher than other people. I'm talking like people in their 20s. And so everybody worries about this. And by the way, that also transcends net worth and how you think people are doing.
Hmm.
And a lot of it is comparing yourself to others, and social media doesn't help. But
Right.
I think you're totally right that we need to position financial health within the broader context of overall health,
Hmm.
of mental health, because if this is the number one thing people are worried about and we think of it as separate from our day-to-day lives, or people will joke that where my money's going is none of my business. And it's funny, but it's also like, okay, that's maybe your number one concern according to most people, so let's address that as a
Yeah.
mental health challenge.
Right. Right. It is a challenge. I mean, because it can be really simple. So, how does your app
Mm-hmm.
help people, like, kind of reduce some of that fear or anxiety around finances?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So there is an anxiety around kind of the unknown. And when I joke that people say, well, what's happening with my money is none of my business, that's just avoiding behavior. And
Yeah.
that's just permission to sort of keep kicking that can down the road. So the first thing you need to do is actually look at what's happening. So you need to actually look at your expenses. And this is an area where we've designed our app to do a better job of that than a lot of other ones
Hmm.
because we're not automating anything. A lot of the other competitors out there will say, okay, automate, all your finance. And there's some things I think you should automate, like saving for your 401k directly out of your paycheck. I think it's
Hmm.
great to automate that.
Hmm.
I have my, electric bill on auto pay because I forgetting that is not going to help me in my life.
Right. Right.
So it's useful to automate some things, but you cannot automate your everyday decisions. I mean, sure, AI is great, but I mean, is AI, over your shoulder when you're hovering over that click to buy button on a pair of shoes that you don't need? I mean, like right now it's not. Maybe that's coming, but like for right now, we're still making our own decisions. So you need to know what's happening there. And I think
Hmm.
once you start to know that, then you can make a plan. Then you can start to think through, okay, this spending that I'm doing right now, do I like this pattern? And maybe you do, and that's totally
Hmm.
fine. And I think there
Hmm.
are people, there's a term out there called money dysmorphia, where people feel worse about their finances, but on paper, numbers wise, they're actually doing okay.
Yeah.
So sometimes you just got to look at it to feel better about it.
Yeah.
And if you, on the other hand, don't like what you see there, then the question is, okay, which pieces of those are you going to change? But it starts
Mhm.
with actually looking at what you're spending.
I know. And I don't know why this is coming up in my head just because it was like it's health. So I'm like, okay. So
Mhm.
it's kind of similar to me as is like, okay, if somebody is just like overweight and their doctor says you need to lose weight, like what do you need to be aware of? And it's like you need to be aware of what is going in your mouth. Like, yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
and you have to be honest with yourself. I mean, and
Yes.
I think that's the hard part for people. And I think with the finances too is like, oh, like I don't want anybody to know where my money's going, or you don't, like whatever said about it, it's none of your business, but it's your personal business to know where your money is going because like you could be like money could be going out of your account without you being aware of it, and it could be on things that you don't even aren't using subscriptions. I think like auto, like you said, auto,
Yep.
a lot of people put stuff on subscriptions and it's automatically renewed. It's great. The companies get their money no matter what, but sometimes it's really hard to remember all of those things. But to keep track
Yes.
and be honest about
Yes.
everything is like the first step to
Hmm.
financial health.
Absolutely. And you're right that we talk about this a lot, that there are a lot of parallels between financial health and physical health, whether it's what food you're eating or what exercise you're doing. Those are
Hmm.
two sides of the same coin. And
Hmm.
I think where we want to align ourselves, we call ourselves the healthy spending app. We don't want to take a page from the toxic diet culture that, kind of leads you to believe all food is bad. We don't
Hmm.
want to think that all spending is bad. It's not. Of course,
Hmm.
you need to pay your bills and buy groceries and live your life. But the question to ask yourself is, does my spending align with my priorities? And so that's why we've very intentionally called the screen in our app where you see the little graph of what you're spending. We've called it priorities because that's really what it's about,
Hmm.
where you are deciding intentionally to spend money.
Hmm.
Some of those are going to be needs, spends. Some of those are going to be wants, splurges, and that's
Okay.
fine. We need
Yep.
to celebrate the splurges that you can't afford. We don't want to be super restrictive, like some diets can be super restrictive,
Hmm. Hmm.
but we want to instead get into a regular pattern, more like regular exercise, whether
Hmm.
that's every day or a couple times a week. You walk, you get out of the house, you go to the gym, maybe you're intense and you do CrossFit, and that's fine.
Hmm.
But the point is just keeping track of those healthy things in a positive way rather than focusing on the restrictive negative things, because that's never sustainable.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when the parallels is just unbelievable. It's going through my head right now because I'm just like,
Uh-huh.
oh, crash diets, just like, oh, try this. And you can't have sugar, you can't have gluten, you can't have, breads, you can't have pasta, you have all of these no, 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 no's. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just like, that is not sustainable because our brain is just gonna go, what? We can't like have a treat once in a while. We can't,
Mm-hmm.
oh, it's a all or nothing type of thing. And
Mm-hmm.
and that's not sustainable. So we
Yep.
can do that with our finances too. It's okay. Like you said something about splurge. So we can like spend, we can like splurge on things that, we want to not necessarily, needs when you think of like house, food, those kind
Right.
of things, electricity, you know. But it's just like, oh, what do I like to have once in a while? And
Yes.
there's different types of people. I mean, you think about people when you talked about CrossFit or just, walking or yoga. I mean, I think of that too, is like people have different financial kind of goals and
Mm-hmm.
also like abilities to like really, I don't know, create a creative intense spending period or
Mm-hmm.
saving period, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so does the app help with like all different types of that kind of people? Like what
Yeah,
do they want to
absolutely.
save on or spend on?
Yes. So the priorities that I mentioned, we actually have different settings for those, and those are
Ooh.
just the targets that you set for yourself. So there's a common rule of there's a common rule of thumb in personal finance. Can be a personal rule if you want to call it that, but a
Yep,
common
yep.
rule of thumb called the 50-30-20 rule. And what that says is that 50% of your income every month should go to needs, 30% to wants, and 20% to savings. 50-30-20. It's been around for like 20 years. This seemed to us to be the simplest way
Hmm.
to manage this. And we were looking for simple solutions,
Right.
that are sustainable, that people can keep doing. But we realized that 50, 30, 20 doesn't necessarily work for everyone. So we have different options for those priorities. And you can choose, for example, the debt crusher, which flips the 30 and the 20. So you are splurging a little bit less, 20%, and saving a little bit more, 30%. Or we have the YOLO, which is a 50, 40, 10. And that means you're only saving 10%, but at least you're saving something.
Hmm.
And again, you're not ignoring it, you're not avoiding it. You're saying, this is what I can do right now, especially for young people
Hmm.
who want to go out and live their lives. And they're
Hmm.
not wrong,
Yeah.
as long as they're making intentional decisions and they're able to save something, those
Hmm.
are very good skills and habits that they can start immediately
Hmm.
and carry those forward for the rest of their lives.
Oh, that's great because I don't like whenever somebody does a one size fits all type thing, I just think it's just not going to work. So this one, you can play with it. inside the app. You can
Yes.
determine which one you want to be if you want to save more for something. So for instance, one of my kids that just got married, has is wanting to save for a house.
Hmm.
So they're gonna, put like like a one income family and just kind of spend, just based on one income and then try to save the rest of the second income. So it's kind of like, oh, great, But
Yeah.
how do kids like fall into that? Like, because there's so many, like you talked about so many undergraduates that are just like kind of almost not really clueless, but it's just like they haven't really thought about it as far as
Yeah.
like, how are they going to manage their money and how are
Yes.
they going to have enough so they don't have to worry about it.
Yes. I think first we need to sort of address this with a little bit of humility and grace because I wasn't doing that either when I was an undergraduate and a lot of us weren't. So I think it's easier being a little bit older to say,
Yeah.
oh, these kids aren't paying attention to stuff. Well, were you really?
Yeah.
I mean, be honest with yourself. And some people were, but we know who they are and they're a minority of the population. Let's
Yeah.
be real. Um, so I think what we really need to think about is the habits that young people are developing and what they're carrying forward. So, like I said, I mean, are they looking at their expenses? Do they know what they are? I mean, for me, that realization, and I've heard other people say this too, that didn't really happen until, I got my first job or even second job. And it's like, okay, now I see how this goes. I've had to pay a bill and it's become real.
Mhm.
So I think a lot of financial education, there's obviously a need for it. And again,
Mhm.
great that some universities have it. I think we should keep doing that. But in a way, it doesn't really become real until you have to practice it.
Yeah.
So I think, people have talked a lot about, oh, you should get your app into the hands of college students and sure they can. I would love for them to download it and enjoy it and use it for the rest of their lives. As a
Mhm.
business person, that would make me incredibly happy. However, what we found mostly is that they're too young because this hasn't hit them yet.
Mhm.
And honestly, for some of the young people who are, I mean, trying to put yourself through college is near impossible these days.
Mhm.
But for the young people who have to take on more of that burden
Mhm.
themselves, whether it's, financial burden or even just mental burden of
Yeah.
trying to piece together enough money and figure it out,
Mhm.
they're sometimes in better shape because they have had to practice this. They have
Yeah.
had to
Yeah.
do it in order to make it work. So, reality is it may not hit you until you it has to,
Yeah.
but that's okay. You can pick
Yeah.
up there and
Yeah.
you can get going.
Yeah, you can start at any time because not only are, people that are young, middle-aged, sometimes we've been able to coast through and be okay, but then it's starting to like catch up going, oh crap, like things are getting more expensive. It's becoming
Hmm.
more expensive to live. And now it's just like, okay, but now I need a new car. And it's like all these things are like, oh, how do I do that without causing more burden? Do you have like one or two things that you're like, oh, I wish everybody could just like, if you could hone in on one or two things that are good points for people to start with, like what would they be?
Yeah, I mean, two things. First of all, you bring up another good point, which is another place where we need to extend, I think, some patience and sympathy to young people. It is simply harder right now than it used to be.
Mhm.
And that's because of economic pressures, but also because there are a lot of things that exist today that
Yeah,
didn't exist 30 years ago, good and bad.
right.
I mean, should I buy crypto? Should I have an HSA? Roth IRAs are relatively new.
Mhm.
Online sports betting is, I mean, and you can piece
Yeah.
together which of these things are good ideas and which aren't. But the point is, there's been a lot of change, and
Mhm.
you can call it innovation if in a
Yep.
positive way. But there's been a lot of change in the ways that you can both spend and save money.
Mhm.
So I think we need to recognize that young people are dealing with that landscape too, and it
Yeah.
is simply harder. That's
Yeah.
that's certainly true. But I think back to your question, the things that people need to do. I mean, like I said, look at you have to look at them. I'm not a therapist. You're much closer to this world than I am, but I don't think there is a therapist in the world that would say, you got a problem? Why don't you just ignore that and maybe it'll go away? I mean, that's not helpful. That's not
That's not
that's
helpful
not
at
good
all.
advice in
Like,
anything. Yeah.
like, how does that work? We've tried to tell our kids that, if somebody's, being mean to you, just ignore it. Like how? Like
Right.
how that still hurts my feelings. It still, causes some issues. No, you just can't ignore it. You might
Yeah.
choose to do something about it. Like what can you
Yeah.
choose to do?
Yeah. So you have to address it head on. And a lot of people come to this point, as you kind of suggested earlier, when there is a big problem and we have this like panic moment and we think,
Mhm.
okay, I'm going to do everything right now. I'm not going to spend anything at all, period. And that lasts for what, a day and a half? And then,
Probably.
oh, I can't do this anymore. I can't not eat bread anymore. I can't
Yeah.
not spend money.
Right. Right.
So, a better plan is to get into that kind of healthier habit where you're thinking about this regularly, but not all of the time. This should not consume
Hmm.
your thoughts. That's not healthy either.
Yeah.
So I think addressing something head on, but then, stepping back from it a little bit and saying, okay, what am I going to do about it? And
Hmm.
doing something small and making one concrete step. Instead of saying, I'm not going to spend anything, identify one subscription that you don't use and are going to cancel.
Hmm.
Identify one thing that you think that's really too much money to be spending on that and don't do
Hmm.
that anymore.
Yeah.
Just one little bit at a time. That's the way we make progress.
Yeah, I know because in talking with, with clients over the years and, health was a main topic that we kind of talked about, but finances were also in there. So I kind of intertwined, I was like, okay, what kind of habit do you have every day regarding, different things? Well, I go down to the convenience store and get a pop it's only $1, I get it, every afternoon. I'm like, okay, so every afternoon you get like a 32 or a 44 ounce, pop, and it costs you $1. Okay, if you want to save, $50 a month on something, like $1 a day on a pop, do you need it every day? And just
Yeah,
questioning, like, okay, well, maybe today I don't need it, and to take that dollar and put it in your savings.
right, right. I also call it pop, so thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay.
Sometimes you need a big pop, but sometimes you don't.
Right.
And I think we need to put the decision making in context, whether it's small things or large things. There's been a lot of discussion about, skipping the latte, skipping the pop,
Hmm.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I mean, that has a point. I think the point that that's making is the same one I'm trying to say, which is just
Right.
look at your expenses, just
Yeah.
think about it.
Yep.
But if you're really trying to like save for retirement,
Hmm.
I mean the everyday pop is not going to
Right.
do it. You got to make bigger changes,
Yep.
higher dollar amounts, and think
Yep.
about, okay, like buying a house, for example, how much do you want to spend on that house? That's going to have not infinitely, but a lot more impact
Right.
on your savings and investments long term than your everyday pop habit. Although everyday, pop habit might have more physical health implications
Right.
if you're really doing the
Yeah.
high fructose corn syrup thing, but you need it once in a while.
Yeah. And so what kind of things should people do? Like, okay, well, maybe I want to do a house. Maybe I want to do invest more for retirement. What is the bigger aspect of that? I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is, taking taking money right away out of, like you talked about earlier, like saving or something, like right off the top of the paycheck.
Hmm.
Is that
Hmm.
something that's, easy, or, something that would be really good to do?
Yes, definitely. And I think most financial advisors recommend, some people call it paying yourself first. It's
Mhm.
really what that means. It's like saving for your future self before you figure out your present needs. And that has a limit. I mean,
Right.
you have needs in the present day,
Hmm.
and wants, needs,
Yep.
spends and splurges in the
Yep.
present day. But automating that part is definitely a good idea. And as far as investing, I mean, you cannot save your way to retirement. That is
Mhm.
not a thing. If it ever was a thing, it is no longer a thing.
Right.
And so you need to invest. And the phrase that people use a lot is that time in the market beats timing the market.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
instead of thinking about, oh, what's down? Should I buy it now? And trying to play some stock game, you're not going to
Yeah.
beat Wall Street at their own game, right?
Right.
So what you need to do is start early. And especially for young people, start that 401k early, start that Roth IRA early, start that HSA early. Those are all really great ways for young people to start investing very, very early.
Mhm.
And don't worry too much about, I mean, make sure you invest the money that's in there. Some
Yeah.
people don't realize that this is a two-step process. You need to put the money in there, but then also log into whatever platform it is and say, I want to buy these investments. And if you don't do that, it just sits there in cash, which is not what you
No,
want.
no, that no, cash is not making very much.
Yeah, so definitely invest it. That's the point of those accounts. Go to
Yep.
that second step, invest it. But if you're picking something that's diversified, like a target date fund
Mhm.
or, some other kind of basket of investments, and whoever owns your account, not owns, but whoever is the,
Yeah.
custodian of that
Yep.
account for you, you should be able to call them up and ask them, for a recommendation,
Mhm.
but put it in something general and diversified, and then just don't worry about it. Just let it sit there.
Yeah.
Investing should be boring and it should be relatively easy. If you just do that, you pick the S&P 500 and you hold it for decades,
Oh, yeah.
that actually is the idea.
Yeah.
And you don't need to get distracted with too much other stuff. It can be really simple. It should be really simple if you're doing it right.
Right. So what you're talking about is just a small habit, just like small changes. I mean, just like a
Mhm.
little thing, but this is just taking money right out of your paycheck, putting it in an investment account, and just leaving it. Because
Mhm.
time in the market, which means consistently investing a little bit over a long period of time, it can grow compoundly. And, people can go and Google compound interest and compound whatever. And you
Yes.
can kind of see, or just go double a penny every day for 30 days, you'll be a millionaire.
Yep.
I mean, that's the idea is that the longer term that it's in there and more consistently that you put in, your return is going to be much greater than if you didn't. And you're going to be much
Yes.
happier later on too.
Yes. And it's real and it's consistent and it works. And the other thing about not, being obsessed with checking it all the time is that if you forget about it for 4 months and, you poke in there and see how much your account balance is, I mean, usually in good times, it's gone up a little. And then it's like, oh, pleasant surprise. And yeah,
Yeah,
it goes down some,
yeah,
but over the long term,
right.
you always win. You
Yeah,
always win over the long term. And
yeah.
that's where you should be starting. So yeah, little habits, compound interest makes magic over time.
Awesome. Listeners that are just excited about this and wanting to learn a little bit more about the Brightfin app, where do they go?
Yes, so we are on the App Store, not Android yet, but we are on the Apple App Store. You can search for Brightfin, just like it sounds, Bright, bright like optimism, bright like the taste of a fresh orange.
Yes.
Okay, Brightfin, fin like finance. So you can search Brightfin on the App Store, or you can go to our website at brightfin.io.
Awesome. Awesome. And you're on some social media too. So where can they check out? Just you have little clips, you have little bits of information for people on social media?
Yes, yes. And I try to be entertaining. So I hope people appreciate that. But I am on social media. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube now as well. So
Okay.
Christine from Brightfin on all those platforms. That's where I'm putting out my videos to entertain and hopefully get people interested in the basic, simple, and even maybe fun stuff about personal finance.
Yes, yes. Educational and, entertainment all wrapped up in one. So go check those out. So thank you so much. It's like as we wrap up today, is there anything that we haven't said that, needs to be said to our listeners or anything that you want to leave them with today?
Yeah, good question. I think we have a lot of people ask about how do I save more money?
Hmm.
And I mean, we do things in fours, spend, splurge, save, share. So we have this one in fours too. How do I save more money? It's really four things. And we've touched on two of them already. So
Okay.
one is look at your expenses, actually look at them, your income as well. But look at that. Two, start small. We talked about that also. You need to start with the small things there. Don't make this overwhelming for yourself. Don't try to cancel all spending immediately because that's
Mhm.
not sustainable. We are just human and that's okay.
Yep.
So look at your expenses, start small. And then the last two are celebrate your wins. So if you choose a small goal, like, okay, I'm not saving this month, I'm going to save 10% of my income.
Mhm.
Small goal, achieve it and celebrate that. Don't
Mhm.
worry about, whatever debt you're thinking about, student loan debt, or I wanted to buy a house. I mean, 10% of your income for 1 month is not going to buy you a house. We know that.
Right.
But achieving that small goal can be really powerful. So celebrate those wins. And then the fourth step is adjust. So you try to do something, you try to cut out something, you try to cut out that daily pop, and it doesn't work because you love it and you keep going back. And maybe that's okay. Maybe you need a different plan to cut out something else if
Mhm.
that's not part of your priorities and make an adjustment there. So I had a teacher in high school who used to say, champions adjust. And I always remember that.
Yeah,
So make sure that you adjust based on what's working for you, what's not, and
right.
revisit that as you go along. So those
And
are 4 steps to save more.
nice, nice. Because you know what? Look at your money, start small, celebrate wins, and adjust. I mean, all of those are, just life skills anyways. Just
Yes.
start
You
small
can
with
apply this
anything.
anywhere. Yes.
Start small, do something, gotta be honest with yourself, start small, celebrate. We don't do that enough. I mean, it doesn't have to be
Mm-hmm.
extravagant. It'll just be like, yes, acknowledge that
Mm-hmm.
what you set out to do, you did. And
Mm-hmm.
just acknowledge and say, yes, I did that. That's a positive step in the right direction. And adjust, like, right. Champions adjust. We have to adjust all the time. And what I like about your app is that you have different ways people can adjust. You might be able to save more, you might splurge more at different times. It's all adjustable and to
Yes.
what's going to work for you, because what's going to work for you is something that you can do over a long period of time and be
Yes.
consistent with.
Yes. And you can change that month to month. So something that's working for you right now might not work next month. And that's okay. You can keep
Yep.
making changes and just adapt that as you need.
Yep. And even just a small save, just keep over long term will
Yep.
provide a lot of great benefits.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Christine, for joining me today. It has been a pleasure to talk with you about personal finance. And I want everybody to go out and check out the Brightfin app. And if you're on an Android, sorry, but just go check out the website and go check out.
There's a wait list. There's a wait list for Android. So yeah, sign up and we'll build it.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much, Christine.
Thanks, Peggy. It's been great.